independent media and unembedded media, a media that tells the truth. Unembedded, that's so important. You know, not on the payroll of the War Department and the New York Times, not embedded in the front lines of troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. Because what perspective are you going to get? I'm not saying the reporters who do that aren't brave, because they are. But if you're eating with the troops, sleeping with the troops, if your life is in their hands, what perspective do you think you will bring to your reporting? And if reporters are going to do that, we need reporters embedded in Iraqi hospitals and Afghan communities and the peace movement around the world to understand the full effects of war.
Bravo.
Now, the power of that independent media is it brings you the pictures and the faces and the names of people, and it makes it much more difficult for you to want to destroy them. I mean, actually, let's go back to the choosing of the targets in Japan. The Secretary of War, Stimson, looked at the target list. He saw Hiroshima, he saw Nagasaki, and he saw Kyoto as one of the cities on the list, and he crossed it off because he said he and his wife had visited Kyoto. It was a lovely city. If only he had visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But it's a very profound point. He had visited. He knew people's names. He knew the landmarks. We need a media that shows and introduces us to and provides a forum for people to speak for themselves. I wrote a book with my colleague Dennis Moynihan called Breaking the Sound Barrier. That's what we need, a media that breaks the sound barrier. And we begin with this image at the United Nations Security Council. It's the painting, the Guernica. You know Pablo Picasso's painting. It is the tapestry reproduction of the original painting. Picasso painted this in a 21-day fury when Guernica, the Spanish city, was bombed. These were during Franco's times. And he said it could never travel to Spain until Franco was gone, the fascist general. And he knew it could get destroyed, so he had weavers make 3 tapestry reproductions of it, and one of them is hung at the UN Security Council for decades. You know this famous painting. It has become a great anti-war symbol. It shows the faces of the animals and the humans etched in those faces, the agony and the pain of war. And when the US was about to attack Iraq in 2003, it wasn't lost on the US and UN officials the problem of having that anti-war backdrop as they made their pro-war pronouncements. So they shrouded the tapestry with a blue curtain. It's our job as independent journalists to pull that curtain back, to show the images of war. Instead of what you get on all the networks, that small circle of pundits who know so little about so much, explaining the world to us and getting it so wrong. We need to go to where the silence is and bring out the voices at the target end of US policy, whether we're talking about Afghanistan, Pakistan, or in Madison, Wisconsin, or Detroit, that in the last years has lost 25% of its population at the lowest point in the last century. We need to hear these voices, meet the people, and then we'll care. Because I really do think if every newspaper that has survived had above a fold, a story, and a photograph, every website featured a picture and a story about war, the top of every radio and television newscast in this country, for 1 week, if everyone's tweets for 1 week were about war, showed the babies dead on the ground, the women with their legs blown off by cluster bombs, the soldiers dead and dying, for just 1 week, Americans are a compassionate people. They would say, no, war is not the answer to conflict in the 21st century. But Instead, we watch the Sunday talk shows on all the networks. Every 5 or 6 minutes, they break for a commercial brought to you by Boeing or Raytheon or McDonnell Douglas or General Dynamics, or brought to you by the gas companies, the coal companies. And you wonder why it is they hardly discuss the wars anymore when they're talking about the battle over the budgets. Well, what about the greatest drain on the budgets in this country? $2 billion a week goes to war in Afghanistan, and we're talking about Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. If you put together the budget deficits of 46 of the states, all of them near crisis levels, some of them close to bankruptcy, and you put together the cost of war in Afghanistan alone, it's about equal for a year. My gosh, why don't we put the money back into the states rather than into a state of war? Just last year at this time, we were in Bolivia. We were in Bolivia for a remarkable global conference on the rights of Mother Earth, or Pachamama. We were there because the people of Bolivia are so deeply concerned about climate change. That week, a year ago today, I wrote a column, Cochabamba, the Water Wars and Climate Change, from Cochabamba. Writing, here in the small Andean nation of 10 million people, the glaciers are melting, threatening the water supply of the largest urban area in the country, El Alto and La Paz, with 3.5 million people living at altitudes over 10,000 feet. I flew from El Alto International, the world's highest commercial airport, to the city of Cochabamba. Bolivian President Evo Morales calls Cochabamba the heart of Bolivia. It was there 10 years ago, in 2000, that, as one observer put it, the first rebellion of the 21st century took place. In what was dubbed the Water Wars, people from around Bolivia converged on Cochabamba to overturn the privatization of the public water system. As Jim Schultz, founder of the Cochabamba-based Democracy Center, told me, people like a good David and Goliath story, and the water revolt is David not just beating one Goliath, but 3. We call them the 3 Bs, Bechtel, Banzer, and the Bank. The World Bank, Schultz explained, coerced the Bolivian government under President Hugo Banzer, who ruled as a dictator in the 70s, to privatize Cochabamba's water system. The multinational corporation Bechtel, based in California, the sole bidder, took control of the public water system. And so last year, exactly a year ago, I walked around the Plaza Principal in central Cochabamba with Marcela Oliveira, who was out on the streets 10 years before, in 2000. I asked her about the movement's original banner, which was hanging for the anniversary, that reads in Spanish, El agua es nuestra, carajo. The water is ours, damn it. Bechtel was jacking up water rates. The first to notice were the farmers, dependent on irrigation. They appealed for support from the urban factory workers. Oscar Oliveira, Marcela's brother, was their leader. He proclaimed at one of their rallies, if the government doesn't want the water company to leave the country, the people will throw them out. And so Marcela recounted the story. She said, on February 4th of 2000, we called the people to a mobilization here in the square. We called it La Toma de la Plaza, the takeover of the plaza. It was going to be the meeting of the people from the fields, meeting the people from the city, all getting together here at one time. The government said it wouldn't happen, it wouldn't be allowed to happen. Several days before this was going to happen, they sent policemen in cars and on motorcycles that were surrounding the city trying to scare people. The actual day of the mobilization, they didn't let the people walk even 10 meters. They started to shoot them with gases. The city was shut down by the coalition of farmers, factory workers, cocoa growers, known as cocaleros. Unrest and strikes spread to other cities. During a military crackdown and state of emergency declared by then-President Banzer, 17-year-old Victor Hugo Daza was shot in the face and killed. Amid public furor, Bechtel fled the city. Its contract with the Bolivian government was canceled. Their leader was one Evo Morales. The Cochabamba water wars would eventually launch him into the presidency of Bolivia. At the UN Climate Summit in Copenhagen, where Democracy Now! Broadcast for 2 weeks, the only national broadcast in the United States to be there every day covering this climate change conference, as we were in Cancun, as we were in Bolivia. And in Copenhagen, Morales called for the most rigorous action on climate change. After the Copenhagen summit, Bolivia refused to support the US-brokered, non-binding, Obama-backed Copenhagen Accord. Bolivia's ambassador to the UN, Pablo Salom, told me as a result, he said, "We were notified by the media that the United States was cutting about $3.5 million for projects that had to do with climate change. You don't support our accord, and we will cut your ability to deal with climate change." Instead of taking US aid money for climate change, Bolivia is taking a leadership role in helping to organize civil society and governments globally with one goal: to alter the course of the UN conferences on climate change. Which is why more than 15,000 people from more than 120 countries gathered last year on Earth Day at the People's World Conference on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth. Morales calling for the gathering to give the poor and global South an opportunity to respond to the failed climate talks in Copenhagen.